Bullying for me is so predictable. When things are predictable, it's actually kind of relieving for a parent. If I can sit with a parent and say, your child's going through bullying, I bet they experience this, and I bet you're feeling this, and this. They're like, wow, how do you know that? And I can say, because it's predictable, and here's what's going to happen next.
Now, are bullies really bad, or are they just human beings that are misunderstood? Do we have to forgive the bully? Do we have to make peace with the bully so we can move on ourselves? Let's get into this episode as we sit with Sebastian Bates, the founder of the Warrior Academy, and someone who has trained thousands of kids, has overcome bullying and started to have some positive self-esteem and confidence back in their lives. This week, Feed Week.
I think that a lot of parents lead from fear, and they're raising their kids from fear. If your parents were bullied, the learning of that could have gone down to you, and it could go down to your child. And so you've basically got to stop this generational curse. Like, our job as parents is literally to face the demons that we've been carrying all our life. 90% of the message we give out there is literally just how we appear to others. For a lot of these kids who are bullies, the reality is that their parents are their first bullies, or their big brother, or their uncle. And so bullying, one of the first lessons of the not a victim process is perspective. It's teaching kids why bullying occurred. I mean, here's the thing about bullies, right? They're not bad people.
Well, welcome to Made in Dubai, Seb.
Thank you for having me.
It's been interesting because I've known you for a long time, but I've not really known you. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question. I remember interviewing you 5 years ago during lockdown. Just before we started, we had this chat where it was this amazing time where suddenly everyone had free time, right? So we had a good hour-long chat, but it was probably, amongst many interviews. We interviewed 60 people in 60 days, and so it was a bit of a blur, but yeah, I mean, if your kids were a little bit younger, then you definitely would have heard of me. Probably would have sent your kids to the Warrior Academy, maybe.
I want to talk a lot about the Warrior Academy today and the great work that you do. But I think that whenever we see people that are doing really good things, we often miss the why. Okay, and the why often comes from a backstory of something that happened or triggered or there was a moment where it was like this was the right thing to do. So where can we start in your story so that the audience can understand where this all stems from?
I think it's only when you look back you can join up the dots, why you do what you do, especially if you've dedicated 15, 20 years of your life to one thing, right? You've got to have a decent reason to sustain all the highs and lows in entrepreneurship. For me, it goes back to being bullied in school really badly. It goes back to as soon as a school bell, running to the nearest toilet or the library to try and hide from the bullies, getting beaten up every day at school, struggling to fit in, being isolated, going home, scared to tell my parents because I felt ashamed or guilty or embarrassed about what was going on, and then seeing my own parents struggle with how to help their child overcome that difficult transition. It took me 4 years to overcome bullying. So it's what you would class as chronic bullying, right? The bullying which just follows a child for years and years. Only to kind of realize that to overcome bullying, you need to do a lot of introspective inward work. You can't change the bullies around you. You can just change yourself. And so now, when I first started the Warrior Academy, I saw other parents coming and dropping their kids off, and they were explaining to me their kids were going through bullying. And I saw the same, look of hopelessness and helplessness in their eyes as I did with my parents' eyes. And so that really fired me up to grow the Warrior Academy, and probably is why I do what I do.
Tell me about that bullying. How old were you when it first started?
I was about 6, 7 years old. We had just moved from I grew up in Aldershot. I was born in Bristol, but grew up in Aldershot, which is a real military area. Went to a state school. There's about 40 kids in my class. My academics were suffering massively. It was a huge class, really bad behavior. In 1 year, we had 13 teachers come and go. So you can imagine the instability in that class, right? You had kids jumping on the tables. There was no control at all. We moved. I went to a small school in Somerset, but there was about 10 or 11 kids in the class. It was a private school, a relatively cheap private school. It's not a big expensive one. It was something like 700 quid a term. So it was a very old school, 100-person school where the headmistress and headmaster were in their 90s, 80s and 90s, right? So this is old school blackboard, screeching, talking about scripture and these sort of lessons, right? So it's very old school, traditional.
Made me feel really old then. Is that on old blackboard? That was normal when I was at school.
Yeah, it was normal. So I went to your school, basically. This just brings back memories. What's wrong with that?
It's a great school.
Sounds good to me. So the focus was all about hardcore discipline and hardcore academics. I grew up with ADHD, but I didn't know it then because no one really talked about it then. No one ever got diagnosed for it. You were just told you were naughty if you couldn't concentrate. So I was struggling with academics, struggling with concentrating, and then struggling to fit into this new group of very privileged kids. And I come from a state school where it was the complete opposite. And so I didn't fit in with this group. Mostly boys in the class. And they saw me as a threat, or they saw me as different, and so they isolated me straight away, right? So that's basically where it started.
And when did you start to really feel the pain of that? Because being isolated is one thing; it's like lonely, and you feel sad, and you don't fit in. There was a great book of verse given to me once about men that don't fit in, but you don't fit in, and then when did it go from gentle mental almost to much stronger? Did that take a long time, or did it happen quite quickly?
No, I think it's a gradual thing, right? Like when it comes to bullying, which escalates into physical bullying, for me it starts off as a little bit of isolation, then name calling, and then physical bullying. And I think the key for me was really not looking forward to school, being terrified of having to go back to school, right? And now I work with parents, and I'm like, one of the hardest things is they know if their child's going through bullying, they know they need to send them to school the next day. Imagine sending your kid to school knowing that they're going to be physically or physically bullied or targeted by these bullies, and there's not much you can do about it. And I think it's that fear, that intimidation, right? Now I've got this process to help kids overcome that, but didn't have that then. And I think eventually when my parents did find out, my dad, being in the army, in full army uniform, walked into school, addressed the entire class himself in full army uniform, and had to give them a 20-minute speech about bullying. You wouldn't be able to do it nowadays, would you? But no, it was amazing to see that, but also that must have come from desperation, right? Like, what could he do? You can't do anything. And so, there are so many lessons when I look back and join up those dots that, you can't save your kids from bullying. They've got to save themselves. You could only prepare them for it.
Did you get physically bullied as well as time went by?
Physically bullied, yeah. A lot of the bullying was physical. So there were, it would often be disguised in sport, playing football and getting extra hard tackles, or some of it was, it got to the extremes of being held and kicked between the legs on break time, this sort of stuff. So a lot of the time I would just try and avoid the entire class. I'd find places to go in the building just to sit alone.
What were their names?
I probably shouldn't say it here on this, but
interesting. You won't say that.
Yeah, I don't think I need to say their names on a podcast.
Justin Zimmerman, Paul Fowler.
Oh, these are the names for your buddies. Oh, interesting. So why do you feel that it's okay to say their names? You're not bothered.
Why would I need to protect them?
That's a good question. Why would you need to protect the bullies? Yeah, I have no answer for that. I guess it's just a personal preference.
I think that I met one of them later in life, when I was 18, 19, 20, that type of age.
Mm.
And he was on his moped and I was in my Golf GTI, and he said to me...
Didn't run him over, did you?
No, we bumped into each other at a set of traffic lights. Yeah, he's no longer alive. I wish I'd have done that. See, I didn't think about that at the time. It's not in my nature. We stopped at a set of traffic lights and he had a crash helmet on and he banged on my window. He's like, my nickname was Splodgy when I was at school. I've never said that on camera. My nickname was what I just said.
Was that a nice nickname for you, or was that?
Well, my first name's Spencer, my surname's Lodge, and so I was just called Splodge, and that was the end of it. And he banged on the window, and so I didn't know it was him, and I wound the window down, and he shouted through. He went, "It's Justin, nice car, mate." And he said, "Pull over," and so we pulled over into a bus stop, and he was, "I've not seen you for ages. How you doing? Look at your car, it's amazing." And when you're like 19, that's what you talk about is the car, isn't it? He said, "Well, what are you doing? How did you get that?" And I just said, "You bought me that."
Oh, really?
And he went, right. I
Right.
said, you were the reason I've got that. I said, you are my motivation, you are my drive every single day, because I wanted to say F you to you more than I did anybody else in the world. And so that was the real kind of crescendo almost to what I'd been through. And so when I hear of anybody that's been bullied, and I have some interesting kind of like ways of dealing with it, to be honest with you, because when I hear of people that are bullied, it really makes me feel sick to my stomach. And one of my daughters is very gentle, and she was bullied. My eldest is tough as old boots. I mean, you so much as looked at her the wrong way, she'll have you up against the wall by the throat, you know. But my youngest was bullied, and I was really torn as to whether I take her out of the school to protect her,
Yep.
or whether it made her tougher. Because as much as I went through hell, it was my motivation every single day until I was about 40 years old.
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that. The book I've written, Not a Victim, we interviewed 15 super successful business owners, sports people, and so on. And all of them attest the success they experienced in their life to the bullying they went through. And so what feels like a massive pain growing up and a traumatic event, which it is, can actually be something that gives you so much benefit and success later on in life, providing you break through it, right? Don't break because of it.
It's that kind of that I'll show you type of thing. And so as much as I suffered lots of pain and I hear your story and I feel like, because I imagine in the classroom what it was like. I imagine that, I remember kicking between the nuts. I remember it in the slips at cricket, and I remember it being chucked in the garbage, the rubbish bins in the art classroom, because we had big dustbins. All this stuff I remember. So when you talk about it, I go straight to those places and visualize you being there. So I really get it. But then I look at my life and I'm like, would I have had the success I had if I hadn't been through that?
Yeah.
And then I go back and look at my dad's childhood, and he was born in Nigeria, lived there till he was 10 years old, and then he was sent to school in the UK. And my grandparents, his parents, never came to visit for 2 years because they were missionaries working for God and spreading the word of Jesus and God and stuff. And my dad was the youngest he was 10 years old, and the youngest other kid was 13. And he was sexually abused and bullied and tormented, and those types of experiences. And I never had the conversation, was that a motivation for you with my dad? Had that conversation, but I feel that there must have been something.
Well, we're always running away from something or running towards something.
Well, you just said something earlier though, and I just want to unpack this a little bit. It's like you said about we can't fix them, so we can only fix ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do you fix yourself? Tell me that, because I don't think I was fixing myself. I think I kept running.
Yeah.
Until I didn't have to face them anymore. But I was still scared of them.
Yeah, so if you look at a situation where a lot of parents would approach bullying like, my child's going through bullying, so I need to remove them from that toxic environment, right? It's everyone else's fault. And so the reality with bullying, if you want to go straight into the heart of this, black belt content, it's the fact that your child will attract the bullies into their life through the traits that they don't own or love about themselves. If you don't love an aspect of yourself, you will appear as a victim, and the bullies will target you specifically for that reason. And that is a tough pill to swallow for parents. I remember when I first started doing workshops for 30, 40 parents across the UAE, and one of the things I would say is, we need to do the work with your child so that they love themselves more, right? And so that they don't appear a victim. If you are it's where you're disempowered, right? So if you are really short as a kid and you don't like that about yourself, right? You don't own or love that specific trait about yourself, you are going to be attracting bullies into your life because of the way you perceive the teasing or the words or so on, right? If you were really tall and you didn't like that about yourself, or if you did love being tall because you were very empowered as a basketball player or something, to you there was something that you loved because of that trait, right? Then if someone made fun of your height, you wouldn't care. You'd feel empowered about it. And so it's about learning about yourself, understanding who you are, and loving yourself. And that is one of the hardest things that a human being needs to actually, go through that journey, right? And so for me, it's all about empowering young people and not encouraging or celebrating the fact that they're a victim. I do a lot of content on this, especially recently, because we're building up to Anti-Bullying Month and so on. And today, I feel more than ever, we are accepting and celebrating victimhood. And so my whole program sometimes gets criticized for victim shaming. And for me, it's the complete opposite. what I'm trying to do is to teach parents that it's completely not okay that your child stays and remains a victim. It's fine that they're vulnerable at times. We are human beings, right? We need to fully appreciate and accept the full spectrum of our emotions. But at the end of the day, we can't stay there. If you celebrate that your child's a victim, you are disempowering them, and life is going to be incredibly painful for them. And it's something I've noticed more and more, with parents. We put this weight on just allowing kids to be softer and softer. And, I've even had one parent say to me, we should encourage our sons to be weak and vulnerable. And I couldn't get my head around that. But that is the energy that's raising kids today. And so, yeah, the two things there are, we need to highlight where we are weak as human beings and where we are not empowered. And we need to focus on improving in those areas. That comes from the parents.
Does weak attract weak?
Does weak attract weak? In some ways, yes.
Does weak feed weak?
I think that a lot of parents lead from fear, and they're raising their kids from fear. So if you look at bullying, right? Like it's almost like this dark shadow that passes through generations. So if you were bullied, if your parents were bullied, that's the learning of that could have gone down to you, and it could go down to your child. And so you've basically got to stop this generational curse from going on and on and on, right? It could be that, I was interviewing this one lady once, and, she was a confidence coach. And I was like, why are you a confidence coach? Similar sort of questions, like, why do you do what you do? And she was like, well, I really want people to feel okay with their bodies in particular, right? Okay with, who they are and how they look and this sort of stuff. I was like, okay, have you ever in your life not felt okay with how you look or your body? She's like, yeah, my mum used to criticize, say you're eating too much, or you don't look, you look fat or whatever it is, right? And I said to her, after the interview, ask your mum if she was ever criticized for that. Was there ever any weight in her life on the emphasis of that value? Spoke to her mum. She said she was bullied massively when she was a kid, for being overweight. And so then this curse, this dark cloud just follows to the next generation, And so ultimately, if you don't learn to overcome those things as a parent, you'll pass them on to your kids, right? Like our job as parents is literally to face the demons that we've been carrying all our life. And if you do that, you don't pass it to your kids. If you don't have the courage to face them, or you don't do the introspective work, you are literally setting a child up with the same toxic traits or issues.
When you consider weakness, you see, if I start watching cat videos on TikTok, I'll just get more cat videos till the cows come home. Yeah. If I watch football videos, I get more football videos. If I watch content that tells me that I should be weak and gentle and soft and kind and not kind, but soft and vulnerable and all that kind of stuff, and I'm consuming content around that, I just consume more and more content around that. So it feeds this never-ending story of that's how I should be. It's almost like it's self-fulfilling propaganda.
Yeah.
How do you... And again, parents looking at social media to try and find answers can find answers to go be strong or go be weak. And the more they look for go be weak, there'll be more go be weak answers.
How do you break that cycle?
How do you?
Yeah.
Without taking their mobile phone off them and putting them on a desert island with no Wi-Fi.
No, you just do that. You need to meet parents where they're at. Right. And so if I go back to that first point where I was standing up and saying this to parents, I was doing workshops where I'd say we need to forgive your child's bully, because one of the best ways to actually overcome bullying is replacing that energy of fear and intimidation, because you haven't forgiven them, with, empathy, understanding that they're, the bullies aren't necessarily bad people. And so this is black belt content, but I was like, right, you've got to meet them where they're at. Right. So the first thing I would say to a parent, if they have children and they have the symptoms of someone who's got a victim mentality, is I would look at things like body language. I would look at things like assessing how ready they are to overcome bullying if it was to occur. So we've got a bully quiz that we run, right? And so a parent will fill it in and understand some of the key areas where they might be weaker. And so it's meeting parents where they're at, so they can actually feel empowered to change those things without calling it, a victim mindset. So that's really important. And then there's some really practical things, right? Like, non-verbal communication. How does a child seem when they walk in a room? I've had cases where there was one boy called Karim, and he was bullied for 2 years in Dubai. And remember sitting with him, and I was like, the first thing I'm going to do is just ask you to walk out the room, walk back in again. And when he came in the room, his hands in his pockets, like this, came and sat down. So over the like sort of half an hour, I had him walk in and out 20 times, and every time just tweaked it slightly, slightly, slightly. And that was one of the most powerful ways to change how people perceived him. Something very practical, just non-verbal communication. The 90% of the message we give out there is literally just how we appear to others, literally, physically, visibly how we appear. And so that's one of the key things there. It's non-verbal communication. Then it's preparing responses. It's role-playing with parents. It's all these practical things. It's not just theory. And so that's the key thing to making sure your child doesn't appear a victim is training them not to be.
How did we've jumped forward a little bit here? How did you get into this world? What were the stepping stones from you? You've been bullied as a kid when you're at school. You leave school. What were the steps? And was it just that was hanging in your mind for so many years that you were compelled to get involved to try and do something positive regarding it?
Do you know what? When I first started the Warrior Academy, I don't think I thought, right, this is to help kids overcome bullying because I went through bullying. I think I only realized that when I look back. I think I really enjoyed developing the confidence of kids, right? Giving them confidence and seeing them grow within that and seeing the things they could achieve. And obviously bullying is a part of that. If you develop a child's confidence, they are less likely to experience chronic bullying, for example, less likely to appear a victim. So that was a big thing for me. But no, I think studying martial arts for 25 years, I was competing professionally, spent about a year and a half fighting in Thailand. I've done 6 different styles, competed all over the world. I've seen the impact that martial arts has on developing someone's character. And, growing up in a military family, we were doing adventures and challenges all the time. So, it was like the boot camp for character development in my house, right? So for me, it was all about character development, becoming a stronger individual, more empowered mentally, physically, and so on. Martial arts was an amazing tool for doing that. And gradually, as the years progressed, I started studying more of the psychology behind martial arts, not just the physical side, but the holistic nature of it, right? The mind, body, the spirit, and everything. I started studying psychologists like Dr. DeMartini, doing courses with him. I'm sure you know him quite well as well.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see links between DeMartini's work and my approach to Not a Victim, right? So all these things kind of came together, and then I started writing books about it, interviewing people who had gone through, traumatic experiences and so on, and that really shaped my opinion. And I think, working with 50,000 families around the world the last 15 years, then gives you insights into how predictable these things are. Bullying for me is so predictable, and so when things are predictable, it's actually kind of relieving for a parent. If I can sit with a parent and say, your child's going through bullying, I bet they experience this, 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 and I bet you're feeling this, this, and this. They're like, wow, how do you know that? And I can say, because it's predictable, and here's what's going to happen next.
Your Warrior Academy was set up as a business, okay, to teach kids martial arts. And obviously having martial arts and that discipline is like when you hear the stories about the guy that sets up the boxing gym in the local community, and the parents are grateful because the boys have been taught, character and discipline and integrity and all that kind of good stuff that comes from, learning to be a boxer.
Yeah.
I'm assuming without any knowledge of this, so it's just wild guessing, so hopefully I'm right, that there's some similarities and some comparables there. But most people set up a boxing gym and they have kids that come Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever it may be, and they get by, and they're either an old failed boxer or an old coach that's now gone into retirement that just couldn't let it go.
Yep.
It was in his blood so much that he couldn't get an allotment somewhere. He decided to do that. But they don't turn it often into a really successful business. So for you, was it business first to turn this into something really valuable as a business, or was it the more kids I help, the better I will feel about what I do, and regardless of the profit that I make?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first thing you said there about most people just do this as a side hustle, it's so true. Like I remember in the UK, people would say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a martial arts instructor." So what else do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. Well, what's your real job?
What's your full-time job? Do you have another business? No. So yeah, and it's interesting because it was really hard to grow the Warrior Academy into a business in the countryside of England. We had to drive 2 to 3 hours between this village hall and that school. Every day I was in the car 3 or 4 hours just so I could go to a populated area where outside of Somerset where I could actually teach enough kids to make it work. but gradually it started really, getting traction. At the same time, I was a personal trainer, so I was doing a mixture of teaching classes, doing personal training. I think that, to your question about what came first, the business in the financials and making an income, or the impact, right? That's the question. For me, it was kind of hand in hand. You can suffer through ups and downs if you believe in what you're doing, right? Like COVID was a great example of that. We were shut down everywhere, but we pivoted online and helped parents even though we couldn't see them physically. And so we were this massive support for parents all over the world. And that would have been a lot harder if we didn't really have a strong why. You know what I mean? It's like if you really believe in what you're doing, it gives you so much strength. So what came first? At the end of the day, I was 19, 20 years old. I had to have an income. Going from having no money after traveling around the world for a year, dropping out of uni to then starting this and taking over a small club. We had to turn it into a business, so it had to make a lot of business sense. But for me, the business reached a plateau after about 4 years. This would have been, I would have started the business in 2011. And then I would have been about 20 years old. By the time I was 24, I was also an extreme sports athlete. And I was doing base jumps and wingsuit base jumps all over the world, did about 500 wingsuit base jumps. I had an accident where I dropped about 50 foot in Switzerland, and I was lucky to survive. I broke every single bone pretty much down, both legs, both feet, both ankles. I was told I could never walk again. And so, it took me 2 years to learn how to walk again. During that process, I almost lost the entire business, but I realized very quickly that the business was completely dependent on me being physically able to teach. And so, after a year of teaching on crutches, I suddenly realized I need to delegate very, very quickly. And this is also something I spent the last week with Richard Branson on Necker Island, and his approach is identical. It was quite funny speaking to him about it. Find good people, delegate very, very quickly before you're comfortable to do it. And that's always been my approach from the age of 24 onwards. I realized I was kind of forced to do that, right? But that delegation made me step back, where a lot of business owners who run a side hustle martial arts company would look at it like they're the instructor, that's their role. I had to very quickly transition into a business owner in my mid-20s. And so I had to build an amazing team around me to be able to do all the technical delivery, because I couldn't teach 25 classes a week on my feet. So that was the key turning point for me.
And did you delegate well? Or were you not very good at delegation? Because most entrepreneurs are really shocking at it at the beginning.
I think, it's funny, isn't it? I think I've always been quite good at delegating. I think obviously you make mistakes, right? There's a big difference between delegating quickly and then managing. And I don't think managing is something I'm, excellent at. I think I'm good at leading, but managing is different, right? Managing is being there every day to deal with the HR issues, to check in on people, to give praise all the time. I forget to do these things all the time, right? And I've managed to find incredible managers around me who can do that. And what I found gradually, as we've now got over 100 staff, is my place is more on leadership, right? It's the vision. It's coming in, inspiring the team, but it's finding amazing managers who can be there, who can look after the team on a day-to-day basis. And I think you got to understand what you're best at and what you're good at and where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. Delegating very quickly is something I've always enjoyed doing. I feel like as a leader, I can quite quickly bring together a team, inspire them, and then leave them to it. I don't micromanage. Maybe my team will look at this and be like, that's not true. But I don't feel like I micromanage. I think when you first delegate, you are obsessive over the quality, right? And this is also the mistake, because you've got to give people some breathing room, because they're not going to be as good as you initially, right? Especially when you first start off and you've got 2 or 3 in the team, you probably can't afford someone who's amazing. So you've almost got to have the misfits and the rebels join your small clan of 4 to 5 people on the team who are willing to take a risk on you. And, if you get lucky, you'll get some amazing people who stand the test of time. And they really believe in your why, in your mission, your vision. And we've got that. We've got, one instructor who's been with us since the very beginning. My first ever employee is still with us. We've employed probably 200 people at this stage, and he's still with us, managing our charity and managing the whole UK operation. But it's interesting as that time goes on, you can then, as a business grows, and you've experienced this, I'm sure, you can then start to afford talented people. And then it's even better, right? Because now, rather than you thinking, the quality is going to slip because I'm outsourcing it, it changes to, they're going to do a better job than me. This is great. I'm learning from them. And so I'm at that really, exciting stage now where we've got the C-suite team and the leadership team, and I've got these amazing, talented people I'm learning from. So it does transition over time, right? But
Well, let's have a look at that journey then. So how long has that business been going?
the Warrior Academy,
Mm-hmm.
15 years.
So 15 years ago, just you. How many children have gone through the academy in 15 years?
Probably 50,000 or more in the last 15 years.
50,000 or more kids that have gone through. So that's had a really positive impact on 50,000 kids. And how many people work for the organisation now?
Around 100, in 7 countries.
100 people in 7 countries teaching martial arts to kids to help them overcome difficulties and challenges in their lives.
To develop their character, build resilience, empower them. Yeah.
Okay, folks, let's talk about real estate. Now, a recent partnership that we've just established on the podcast is with AYS Developers. Luxury properties with high-end finishes from people that really understand the subject. Often in Dubai, you'll find stuff that is maybe substandard. With AYS Developers, you're not going to see that. You're going to see fantastic properties that you can buy, you can invest in, you can make a home on Dubai Islands and other places too. So go visit aysdevelopers.ae and check them out. I promise you it'll be worth the trip. What are you most proud of regarding that?
I'm proud of staying true to our values throughout the whole journey. I'm proud of how quickly we've grown by making big, courageous leaps and playing to win constantly. And I'm proud to have something I send my own kids to, and they get to experience it. I've got 3 kids, 8, 5, and 1. The 1-year-old hasn't started yet, but my other 2 kids, they get to experience that. So I now get to experience that as a dad as well. So those are the things I'm most proud of. I'm proud of our team and how much they care. They truly care about the work they do with kids, and I think that's rare to have a team that's that invested emotionally into the outcome. And I'm proud of the fact that we're impact driven. We're not just a business that's there to make money. We measure the impact, right? So for every paying member we've got 3 students on a scholarship in the biggest slums on the planet.
And what's the biggest impact you've had with that?
We've mentored.
Or where is the biggest impact? Yeah.
There's so many individual cases. Like we've mentored teens who are suicidal. I've had a parent write to me, a long 2 to 3 page handwritten letter saying we literally saved their child's life who was suicidal. We've had kids who had never spoken before, start to speak after working with us for a year. We've had children who were heavily autistic, being turned away from every single sport, then be fully accepted by us because we're so inclusive and we work with so many children on the spectrum. We've had kids, with severe ADHD told they're naughty, similar to my my background, for the last 5-6 years of their education in school, only to see themselves in a different light and to see that as a strength because we channel it in the right way. We've had, on one really interesting case, we do a family class, right? Where this is just a random thing that I'm proud of, where we bring the families together to train with their kids, the dad and the son, or the dad and the daughter, the mum and the son. In this occasion, the parents were divorced, and they came together for the class to be a united family. And within a year, they actually got back together again. It was this incredible thing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and so you've got this situation where it was just a powerful force for good. So that's the local stuff, and then I look at the scale of what we're doing. I'm proud of the fact that we have 6,000 children on scholarships, vulnerable kids. We've rescued from slums, homeless shelters, all over the world in 7 countries, and one of the biggest impacts we've made there is not just helping them transition from homelessness into care and then into full-time education. We've launched a food program. When I visited Kenya recently in June, one of the things I noticed...
Is that to do with the foundation? Then?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just keep that, because I want everyone to understand the 2 differences
Okay.
here, and I want them to get a really good understanding of the academy and the impact it can have, because I'm conscious of people that are listening to this right now that are like, my child could benefit with being there.
Yeah.
So I want them to get a good understanding of that first. So that academy that you've got with all the kids that have gone through, you've obviously had some great results along the way. For the vast majority, upon entering at whatever age they start at to exiting at whatever age they finish at, on average, You're taking a kid with low self-esteem, low confidence, and you're teaching them to believe in themselves, and you're giving them great levels of confidence, discipline, respect,
Yeah.
kindness.
So in a nutshell, what we do, the parent comes on board, they fill in a breakthrough area assessment. So we literally measure the soft skills of the children when they start with us, right? So we measure their confidence, their conduct, and their concentration. They're the 3 C's. Underlying that is community. It's our hidden 4th C because it knits everything together, right? So a good example is when you look at these 3 C's, if you imagine the 3 circles overlapping each other, your child may come to us with low confidence, but they might have high concentration or high conduct behavior. So that's a good example of that, is a child who's quite academic but doesn't want to do any of the sport, never puts their hand up, this sort of stuff. On the flip side, you might have a child who's high confidence but low conduct, low concentration. And so the breakthrough area is their lowest C. And so what we do as an organization is we then double down on that lowest C in the first 3 months as much as we can, with a bespoke program, with exercises to do at home. We plan goals, we work with the teachers and schools and so on. So that's how we do it. In terms of the method, there's a 4-step process: community, inspire, challenge, lead. We actually guide them through. Ultimately, what we want to do is develop each of these children into leaders, because there are so many benefits when you develop leadership skills in a child. We're talking about the non-verbal communication. We're talking about emotional intelligence. The impact on their soft skill development is massive, and so their lives literally change through this process. So one of the things we do is we measure before, and then every 3 months we measure their soft skills again. And so for most kids, they go through our program and we can literally say to parents, your child's confidence has improved by 80%. And so now, having tens of thousands of these scorecards done, we can now say with confidence that the average increase in confidence is 82%. And that's a self-assessment parents do. It's not something we fill in, which is quite amazing, really, because they're able to measure their child's confidence with a system that's been proven.
And they end up being kung fu, karate, lethal.
They get a black belt at the end. I mean, this is the thing, right? So I was asking a podcast the other day, how can we make sure that our kids reach their full potential and they become the Bruce Lee or the Tiger Woods or whatever it is? And I said, do you really want that? Do you really want that for your kids? Because, when I look at the people at the very top of their level, I see a lot of toxic energy. These guys or girls are running away from something pretty bad, or they're running towards something, right? And when they look back, they join at the dots. They're like, I've lived an incredibly unhealthy life to achieve these goals. I'm not in that game. I'm in the game of raising happy, successful human beings, right? My focus is on giving your child a black belt character. If they get a black belt around their waist, fantastic. But my goal is who they become as human beings, right? That's what I want for my own kids. So I imagine that's what the 50,000 parents who have joined us want for their kids.
Did you write your books after the Warrior Academy or after you established the foundation?
Both. When I started the Warrior Academy, before the foundation.
Before?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've written 2 books.
Yep.
And the first book that you wrote?
First book I wrote after my daughter was born, 2017, The Warrior Method. Yep, that details our 4-step methodology.
Yeah.
The next book was a few years later, Not a Victim. I think it was 21 or 22, which is the bullying process, the anti-bullying process.
So they're literally workbooks for people to work through, understand, and use practically, rather than just have a read and put them back on the shelf.
Exactly. 2 people come to me for the Not a Victim book, for instance, right? My child's being bullied right now. What do I do? Or I'm worried they might go through bullying. I'm proactive, right? One parent's thinking about putting a life jacket on their child. The other parent's throwing a boy to try and save their life. And so the way I built the Not a Victim book is they can literally flick to the middle of the book, and within 2 weeks, most parents can help their child transition through bullying. There's 6 steps in there. They literally follow those 6 steps. And I would say 80% of parents can help their kids, transition through bullying with those steps.
Do you know the stats on the percentage of kids that are bullied on average in a standard primary, secondary school, numbers, data, anywhere in any Western country or in?
Yeah, they've done some. I did a post about it recently, but something like 40% of kids globally go through bullying or share that they've been through bullying, right? Because the other issue is we don't really know, because kids don't tell you. One of the biggest challenges we've got is that, kids feel so much shame or embarrassment or whatever it is, or guilt, that they're going through bullying. They just don't tell their parents. And one of the hardest hitting points for parents is you can have the best relationship ever with your daughter or your son, and they still might not tell you they're going through bullying. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So when you do these surveys, for me, it's, having worked with so many kids and in so many schools, it's obvious that it's massively underestimating. It will probably be double the number. In my opinion, having worked with so many parents, the number's more like 80-90% of kids who go through education and experience bullying.
Do you take bullies in?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, bullies, the ones we need the most work, right? It's too.
But the parents say, my kid's a bully.
We do have some parents who are aware enough to share that. Do you know what I mean? It is rare, because I don't think most parents would believe their child is a bully. It's a very difficult thing for them to grasp, right?
You wouldn't make much money.
Yeah, right. But I mean, here's the thing.
People have you done the last 15 years? 11.
11 bullies. The Bully Academy. But
11 admitted.
I mean, here's the thing about bullies, right? They're not bad people. And for a lot of these kids who are bullies, the reality that is that their parents are their first bullies, or their big brother or their uncle. And so bullying, one of the first lessons of the not a victim process is perspective. It's teaching kids why bullying occurs, that bullies aren't bad people. It's this flow of negative energy. And we teach kids that in a story. So we'll walk them through a story where we use, different names as an example, and we explain this child's going through this, they're being picked on and so on. They then go to school and they start picking on and so on, their other friend at school. Why do you think that's occurring? And so it starts clicking, right? Once you get into a child's brain and you can teach them why the bullying occurs. I had one example of a 9-year-old boy I was mentoring through bullying, right? And he'd gone through bullying for months. And I sat down with him and I asked, who was the child who was bullying him? And he said, his name is Sam. And so I was like, okay, here's the reality with Sam. Tell me a bit about Sam. Has he got a big brother? Has he got what's his life like? Oh, okay. His parents have just been through separations, so they're divorced, all this sort of stuff, right? He's moved homes a few times. Basically, Sam's going through a tough time, right? He comes into school, lets off steam. Unfortunately, the victim of bullying is experiencing that steam being let off on them. And as soon as he understood that, it was like relief on his face. He's not intimidating.
Yeah.
He's just another kid who's going through a really tough time. Here's the beautiful thing about this, right? He then goes to school the next day, sits down with Sam and asks him what's wrong. Over the next week or two, he mentors his bully through bullying. And that was one of the most beautiful examples of emotional intelligence I've ever seen in a preteen.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, you set up the Seb Bates Foundation.
The Bates Foundation, yeah. I couldn't get my name in there first, but...
You couldn't get your name?
No, Jake, I didn't try. The Bates Foundation, not the Gates Foundation.
If only, yeah, if only. So, why?
Why did I set up the Bates Foundation? We were donating as a business for many years. Charity donations, they were linked to our... to transactions in the business. So whenever someone bought an annual membership, we would give 365 days of life-saving clean water through a company called B1G1. We managed to give out something like 300,000 days of life-saving clean water, 2 months of education in India, 2,000 bicycles to Cambodia, and so on. And that was fantastic, but I felt detached from it. I realized that one of the things we could do is, instead of donating money, we could give 10% of our class spaces in the UK, because we only had the UK at the time, to children who needed it most. So what we realized we could do is give 10% of our spaces in classes to kids who were going through really difficult times, kids who refer to us from welfare officers, kids who refer to us from military families where their parents went away for 6 months.
Yeah.
We partnered with children's hospices, so we would mentor the siblings of kids who were terminally ill. So they had to go, if you imagine, you've got a family, you've got 2 kids, one child is terminally ill, they're in a hospice. They've got 6 months to live. All of your energy as parents goes to looking after that child. Your other child still goes through bullying, still goes through adolescence, still goes through all the pressure of exams and all this sort of stuff, right? Which is where we come into support. So we helped those parents navigate that really difficult transition and then the loss and how they deal with that afterwards. So we were mentoring all these kids and helping them within our organization. We saw the impact that was making locally. When we came to Dubai, we suddenly realized, okay, we're now dealing with thousands of affluent families who have joined us. We didn't really feel the exact same need we could experience in the UK. And we're a global organization. Our families were from all over the world, Asia, Africa, India, Europe, all over the world. So we suddenly realized, well, what if we could take this program that we know is making a massive impact to these kids locally and we could place that program into the poorest areas on the planet. The other side of that is we wanted to teach kids growing up in Dubai that they can make an impact, that they can make a global impact. And in fact, it's part of their responsibility, right? One of the hardest things, I think, when I look at a lot of the parents in Dubai, they've been incredibly successful. They've, had courage throughout their life to take big risks, right? In order to be where they are, to have great careers or businesses, they've had to overcome a lot of adversity. They didn't necessarily come from this life, right? And so their kids have only ever known this. And so the one thing that makes those parents successful here is the one thing their kids never experience. And so a lot of their kids are at risk of growing up entitled because they're surrounded by abundance. And so one of the things that we give the children of Dubai and Abu Dhabi by developing this charity is we show them what the world is like, right? We give them that little taste of, you are living this incredibly entitled and abundant life, but out there, this is going on. And if you want to do that with children, you've got to meet them where they're at. And so I mentioned to you before, right? We let the children donate their uniforms. They feel this connection. We've got kids who donate their uniform, which is a really powerful thing for them, right? When a child wears a martial arts uniform, it's their identity. And so they think it's something they're going to keep for life. Then they donate it to a child who's been homeless for the last 6 months in Kibera slum in Africa with a little note to them as well. And so we've connected all these incredible families in Dubai with all these families all over the world who are living in poverty. And so that's an amazing lesson that we wanted to pass on. It's about giving the kids, resilience, perspective, gratitude.
And how many kids have you impacted by doing this?
So right now we teach about 6,000 vulnerable kids every single week in 7 countries. We teach a lot in Kenya. So Kenya, we're the biggest martial arts academy in Eastern Africa, independent martial arts academy in Eastern Africa at the moment. We actually did a world record in June for the biggest martial arts class in the world with 1,000 kids in a slum in Kenya. You can stick some B-roll on this because there's some amazing drone shots.
I saw it.
1,000 kids in uniform, and this is their only second piece of clothing, right? They've got their donated school uniform, and then they've got this martial arts uniform, and these pristine white uniforms in this massive, dirt playground, and drones going everywhere. And it was just, I'm teaching on the top of this school roof with the principal next to me. It's quite funny. But these kids, as fun as that is, these kids go home. They have 1 meal a day if they're lucky, right? And we teach 4,000 kids every week in Kenya. One of the heartbreaking things that I realized was that a lot of these kids were coming to class hungry. And so when I was there with the 15 patrons of ours, the entrepreneurs who support the charity, one of the things I said to them is, look, you guys, you can join me on this if you like, but I can't let these kids come to class hungry. And so from today, we're starting a program which we're going to call "No One Comes to Class Hungry," and we're going to give out food every time we teach. So every time a child now comes to class, they get a bowl of porridge, or they get rice and beans, or avocado, which grows locally, right? All these sorts of things. And so the amazing thing there is we now give out 100,000 meals every single month, and we've now made that part of our program. So they get fed, they get clothing, they get housed if they were homeless. They get social care because our instructors act like social care workers, right? We're moving into doing medicine, giving them footwear, sponsoring them for education if they're showing promising results, and so on. One of the greatest things that we realized about this is we've actually had a tangible impact on school attendance. They want to get a meal and they want to do martial arts, so they turn up to school. If you can just get kids in the slums to turn up to school, the trajectory of their life completely changes. So what seems like an unrealistic idea that martial arts could actually change these kids' lives suddenly becomes the catalyst for doing exactly that.
It's not just that though, because let's talk about the impact that this has on businesses and the difference it can make. I know, being somebody that went across and built a playground in a school in Rwanda a couple of years ago, the impact that had on me and how close that brought me to my colleagues, and how we still storytell to this day. We still remind ourselves of those special moments. We all have a connection to at least 2 of those children that are on our Instagram or whatever it is that we send messages to, and they talk to us. That doing that kind of work to help the kids is wonderful, but then there's other people that directly benefit from that too. a lot of companies look at CSR initiatives. A lot of the times, like, well, we need to do something to make sure we tick a box. And here in the UAE, 1 in 5 employees leaves every year to go and work somewhere else. So people are losing 20% of their workforce every year on average. And a lot of the time people leave, it's for 500 dirhams more per month as a salary.
Yeah.
And so how do you solve that problem? Well, if you give people mission, purpose, a sense of belonging, teach people about money, maybe they won't leave for 500 dirhams more. Teach them to understand that sometimes there are problems in the world that are bigger than their own. And all of a sudden, things can change. And when a company might consider or worry or be fearful of spending money on doing CSR for the sake of CSR, doing some of the work that they potentially can do with your foundation could actually really help their business in even top and bottom line too.
Yeah.
Tell me some examples you might have of that or how you interpret that.
So I really believe that people don't just want to turn up to get paid, right? People want to feel like they're investing in something which is making an impact. Because when someone turns up to work for you, they're working for themselves. They're not working for you. They're working for themselves because they want to earn money so that they can live and put food on the table, right? Now, if you can inspire that individual that their work, while they're doing that, their work, beyond the local impact they're making, is actually making this vast ripple effect impact. I think that's something that inspires them to keep showing up, but also makes them proud to be working there. And one of the biggest shifts I noticed when we started this was, we went from our staff describing us as, they are starting this academy, or they are doing this work over there, or, they, to we. And so it's this identity shift of actually we are the company. And that's a really powerful step. The other thing is, you can spend thousands of pounds, per employee on HR, culture initiatives to try and improve the culture of the organization. One of the things we do is, it might cost me 1,500 quid to send someone on our team to Kenya, and we'll put them in groups of 3 or 4, send them to Kenya. They'll spend a week on the slums teaching with a video team to kind of grab the moments, the special moments that they share out there. Not only do they get to explore a new country and meet the kids and the instructors, but they return with this purpose energy, right? And they return and they're just so fired up to do the normal work, because they realize that the normal day-to-day work is what funds the massive impact that we're making. And suddenly it's like local success means global impact. And that is one of the things that, we've really built into the culture of our organization. Started off, doing this just by giving spaces, and now we're doing this directly donating. So we use the Warrior Academy as the first step in the charity, but now we're partnering with other charities to grow this entity to make an even greater impact, right? So the instructors and the staff within the Warrior Academy feel directly responsible for the work that we're doing in the poorest place on the planet.
I think that people don't get that. Okay, and I don't know if it's the HR department, if it's the employee, or whether it's the CEO or maybe the CFO.
Yeah.
But somebody doesn't get that, because as we sit and talk about it right now, it's damn obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
but
a no-brainer.
They don't get it if they haven't done it themselves, right? So those people who don't get it need more than anything to go. It's if you have visited an impoverished area and done any charity work or anything like that, and you leave feeling a shift in perspective, right? A shift in gratitude. The way that the little things in life. We were talking about Charlotte serving meals earlier, right? And so she's contributed so much to the charity, both in donations, but in time and awareness and everything. And she's literally just finished a 7-day challenge where she gave up, one meal a day, and was walking 10,000 steps without any shoes and sleeping on the floor, and basically mimicking the life of a child living on the slum. When you do something like that, it's because she's visited the slums, right? You don't just randomly think about putting yourself through 7 days of suffering. She left Kenya with this purpose energy that she wanted more people to know about. And that's the kind of culture we've got within the charity as well. It's bringing people to these locations to actually see it and feel it, and to grasp it, the raw reality of what life is like for these kids. And one of the things that I find demotivating about charities is the lack of transparency. I always felt that whenever I donated to charity, does that money really go to the kids or to solving the problem? And a lot of it, I feel, goes towards, like a business, goes towards marketing or paying for big overheads and this sort of stuff. And so with our charity, I cover all operations expenses. The marketing, there's no marketing budget for the charity at all. So we just have patrons in my network who join us on this. And then the great thing is the money goes directly to the instructors who do the work. A month after they've done the work, they then get paid, which removes a lot of the potential corruption when you work in developing countries, right? If it passes through different places, suddenly you start seeing money go missing, all this sort of stuff. So we've managed to eradicate huge overheads, eradicate corruption, and give transparency. And I think that the patrons who join us, they love that about what we do, and they love that they can actually see where the donations go and what that actually means and the impact that actually makes. And then they get to go there and experience that adventure, right? It's this fusion of impact and adventure that combined gives them this 3-year journey, which just changes their life. The one thing that we promise patrons when they come on board is, give me 3 years and I'll change the way you look at the world and your place within it.
It's really interesting. When I think about this, it's like, imagine if an entrepreneur came to you or to me, someone that owned a business, said, how can I make more money? Okay. And the answer from all of us was, take your staff to somewhere in one of those many countries and allow them to be exposed and experience the pain and suffering of people that are living their everyday lives there.
Yeah.
You know what? Because it almost is a guaranteed way of getting a company, if not more top line revenue, for sure more streamlined.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is, if you asked me what I was doing in 10 years, what my big goal was in 10 years, I would always kind of struggle to answer that until I started looking at entrepreneurship like something I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm an entrepreneur. This is what I do. I'll do this till I'm 80 or 90, right? Or even longer if I can. And, I think it's finding something you cared so deeply about that you're willing to spend the next 50 or to 100 years doing, right? When you're 90, you're going to wake up in the morning and think, this is a game I'd like to play. It's a game worth playing, right? That's the way I see entrepreneurship. 100-year adventure of a game worth playing. And the seeds that I'm planting now aren't necessarily short-term seeds, right? If I take a group to Kenya, or I donate all this money and time and energy to building clubs in Kenya, in the first year or two, you might not suddenly see a massive, profound impact in on your top line or whatever it is, your P&L. But what you do change is over the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years, you've been playing a much, much bigger game, right? You haven't just been making money from your business. You've been harvesting fulfillment. And so after 50 years, you look back and you're like, that was a fulfilling adventure. Like, wow, look at what we did. We didn't just do this. We didn't just make an 8-9 figure business and, exited, and that was great. We literally made a dent in poverty in Africa. We literally made a dent to, 200,000 lives in a slum in Kenya. I can open a book and be like, look at all these letters that people have written to me saying I've changed their life, right? I was in Richard Branson's home in Necker last week, and in one of the rooms, I can look round and I was seeing all these letters from famous people, really heartfelt, emotional letters saying how he had impacted their life, or that moment with him, or that adventure they went on together. That to me is a successful entrepreneurial journey, right? It's looking back and your life's just been this adventure filled with fulfillment. And I think that takes patience, but it also takes perspective. So many people get into entrepreneurship and they're like, I need to do this in the next year, in the next 5 years, otherwise it's not really a success. If you just step back, be a bit more patient with it, and find a game that you're willing to play over the next 50 years, your life will change.
You said harvesting fulfillment. What a beautiful thing to say. I really loved that. Your time in Dubai means that you clearly like being here. Your family are growing up here. What role do you think Dubai has had on your thinking and the things that you've developed since you've been here too?
My thinking and what I developed. Dubai is an incredible place filled with opportunity. I feel like the majority economic expats are here. So you're surrounded by people who are risk takers. They're courageous, right? They're looking for opportunities. And so the mindset is different here. There's an energy in this city, right? with that energy, you've got to be a bit careful, because I feel like we've forgotten how to winter here, right? It's sunny all year round. We're always working, and so there's very little time where we pause and reflect. So we're here. I tend to spend 8 months of the year in Dubai. I do a lot of skiing, and I spend lots of time in the mountains in the winter. We tend to spend a month in Thailand in the spring, and then 2 months in Italy in the summer. People say to me, "Where would you live if it wasn't Dubai?" And my honest answer to that is, I can't imagine myself living anywhere else. I can't imagine. Everywhere's got its benefits and negatives, right? It's depending on you and your family and what you like to do. But for us as a base, this is, it's one of the most amazing places. Dubai has accelerated the commercial growth of our organization, so much so that we're able to accelerate the charity side of what we do, right? If I was doing this in the UK, we'd be 90% smaller as a business, and we'd be making, 100 times less impact because of that. So, that's the way I look at it. The other thing I would say is, Dubai is an incredibly safe place. If I look at this from a parent, Dubai is a very safe place, which is fantastic. However, it's a double-edged sword, because I come from a Scandinavian kind of upbringing. My mum was Danish, my dad was army, so I grew up in an environment where, as kids, we were constantly encouraged to take risk, right? And over here, it feels like it's a very, very different environment for kids. There seems to be a security guard on every single corner, which is great for safety. But often, the smallest step that a child might make to take a risk is completely corrected very, very quickly. My son was on a trampoline the other day and told not to jump, and so it's really, really hard for kids to take risk here. And that's where we come in with the Warrior Academy, where we help do that in a safe environment where parents trust us, and we teach kids to leave their comfort zone and grow and do competitions and that sort of stuff. But they do need to have an emphasis on taking a risk, on leaving their comfort zone, because it's very hard for your kids to do that when they go to the park.
And lastly, there are people out here listening to this and watching right now that are like, how do I get involved? If I want to get my kids there, can I find the Warrior Academy? Is there a waiting list? Can I join easily enough? And what's these bunch of entrepreneurs you keep going on about? How do I get involved in that? How do I become a patron? So could you give us some understanding there too?
Yeah, sure. So if you're a parent in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, we've got 4 incredible academies, full-time academies we call character development centers, in Al Wada Mall, in Arjan, in Al Quoz, and a new one in Jumeirah Islands. So you can go to warrioracademy.ae and you can sign up there. If you are an entrepreneur and you want to go on a life-changing 3-year journey, meet other incredible entrepreneurs from around the world who have amazing, successful businesses. This group is primarily entrepreneurs who have exited their businesses and they're looking for more purpose and more adventure in their lives. And you want to donate to a charity with transparency, with this element of camaraderie and adventure to it, where you actually go and visit the slums and you meet the kids in the schools and so on, then we can take you on that adventure. And so the way we see that is, we will help grow your business, and you'll see the impact we're making, because if we can grow your business, you'll make more of an impact. So it goes hand in hand. And a lot of these entrepreneurs share a lot of advice, business advice. We do the business mastermind we call Desert Dawn every single November in Dubai. So you'll be a part of that amazing community. You can do that by going to thebatesfoundation.com.
Wow. So you've kind of like ticking all the boxes there. You're helping out children, you're helping out families, you're helping out entrepreneurs, you're enabling businesses to understand how they can have their staff can have more impact and they can have more impact. You're enabling businesses to potentially create more revenue for themselves. And that's only a positive, because then they can have more impact with the charity. It's almost as much 360 as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, but also very, very linked, right? Like it's basically my journey, but just productized. If you look at my journey as an entrepreneur, it's building the business, it's working with kids as a child, going through bullying and martial arts myself, and then it's the impact side of what we're doing and teaching other business owners to do exactly that. So, yeah, it's full circle, isn't it?
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, Seb Bates, thank you very much for coming to join us on the show today. You clearly are someone who was made in Dubai, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.